All right, I'd like to call our meeting to order, the first item of business is the approval of the minutes from the October 13, 2017 meeting. I'll move to approve those minutes. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? The motion carries. Next item is my report. So good morning and welcome to the October 26, 2017 public meeting of the New York City Campaign Finance Board. Today, the board will be voting on public funds payments to qualifying candidates in the general election being held on November 7th. Tomorrow, candidates on the general election ballot are required to file disclosure statements with the board detailing their campaign finance activity from October 3 through October 23. This information will be made available on the CFB website tomorrow and over the weekend. In regards to our voter engagement efforts, the official NYC Votes Nonpartisan Voter Guide is now available in print and online for voters to get informed about their candidates and the ballot proposals. NYC Votes has also launched an advertising campaign to encourage participation in the general election. Those ads are now running on cable television and streaming services in addition to print versions on subways, buses, and other locations across the 5 boroughs. We encourage community groups and civic organizations to help spread the word about this election by sharing the NYC Votes spots on social media. All of these materials are available for download on the CFB's website. Lastly, the final mayoral debate before the general election is next Wednesday, November 1st. If you missed any of the debates held this fall, go to nyccfb.info/debates 20-17 to watch the archived live streams. Then read the voter guide at voting.nyc and go vote on November 7th. I now turn to CFB Executive Director Amy Loprest for her report.
Actually, this time we have new, because we now have a new chair of our Voter Assistance Advisory Committee. So Board Member Naomi Sauter will give a brief report about that.
So I just want to say I'm honored to have been appointed to chair the Voter Assistance Advisory Committee. I attended my first meeting last Wednesday, and we received a very interesting report from one of the advocates for a constitutional convention, and also had an interesting report on participatory budgeting and how, and a discussion about how the VAC can coordinate with the advocates for participatory budgeting. So I look forward to serving, and thank you again.
So I had the opportunity on Tuesday morning to testify before the Philadelphia City Council about a proposed series of laws that they are considering to enact a public financing program that is modeled on New York City's program. So it's always great to see other jurisdictions interested in creating small donor matching funds programs, and a lot of interest in Philadelphia, interesting questions, great discussion, and I look forward to them considering that legislation, which they should be just considering whether or not to put it on a ballot referendum probably by the end of this year.
Do we know what the prospects are, Amy?
It's, it was hard to tell because there are 13 members of the Philadelphia City Council, and at various times during the morning's hearing, there was, I'd say, at least 7 of the members circled in and out, and some of them had objections, monetary, fiscally. Some had philosophical objections. Very many had, could see the benefits. So, I mean, not being a student of Philadelphia politics, I don't know really. I can say that the people from the Philadelphia Board of Ethics, which would be the organization that would administrate the law, are cautiously optimistic.
Great. Anything else?
Nope.
All right. Our next item of business is to vote on the public fund payments. Amy, why don't you set that forth for us? Okay.
Today, the staff is recommending the following payments, public funds payments. For the office of mayor, Bill de Blasio, $54,025. Nicole Maliatakis, $31,749 for total payments for the office of mayor of $85,774. For the office of public advocate, public fund payment to Letitia James in the amount of $997. For the office of Queensborough President, Melinda Katz, $997. The office of Staten Island Borough President, Thomas Shrebenko, $541. In City Council District 1, Aaron Foldenauer, $114. Christopher Marte, $70,885. In City Council District 4, Rachel Honig, $39,820. In City Council District 9, Tyson Lord Gray, $57. In City Council District 13, Marjorie Velasquez, $5,472. In City Council District 18, Michael Belzer, $2,223. In City Council District 24, Mohammed Rahman, $997. In City Council District 26, Marvin Jeffcoat, $31,663. In Council District 27, Rupert Green, $621, and I, Danique Miller, $1,852. In Council District 32, Michael Scala, $57. In City Council District 47, Raimondo Dinero, $12,490. In Council District 49, Michael Penrose, $2,422, and Deborah Rose, $1,995. And in City Council District 51, Dylan Schwartz, $236 for total payments for the City Council of $170,904 and total payments today of $259,213.
Is there any questions or discussions about these items? If not, I'll move the adoption of these payments. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? The motion carries. We now have some penalty determinations to make. We have one candidate appearance, and that is Ali Najmi. Is the candidate here?
No, but I'm here on behalf.
Okay. Please have a seat at the table, and will the CFB staff have a seat at the other table?
Good morning, Chair Schaefer, members of the board.
If I just might, the way we proceed is the staff will make a very short presentation of the issue, and then we'll turn to you for your presentation.
That's fine, and I've given my appearance to the stenographer.
And for our benefit, your name is?
Sarah Steiner.
Nice to meet you.
Sorry, excuse me.
And what is your role with the campaign? I'm sorry.
I'm the attorney for the campaign.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair Schaefer, members of the board, Executive Director Loprest, and Ms. Steiner. My name is Joseph Gallagher, Associate Counsel here at the CFB, and I have with me today Sonia Simos, an auditor for the CFB. Before the board this morning is the matter of the Ali Najmi campaign in the 2015 election for City Council, District 23. The campaign was a participant in the program and received $100,100 in public funds. CFB staff recommends that the board find the campaign committed the following three violations. CFB staff recommends that the board find the campaign committed the following three violations of the Act and board rules: accepting a contribution from an unregistered political committee, making impermissible post-election expenditures, and exceeding the expenditure limit. The campaign contests these violations and penalties.
Thank you.
I'd like to respond to these one at a time. First, regarding accepting the contribution from an unregistered political committee, I would like, if you would please, to take into account the fact that the unregistered political committee was the Jim Owls Democratic Club, which has been registered both before and after this, and there was a very brief gap in their registration, which they were unaware of and we were unaware of. The Jim Owls Club, which you may have seen come past you in donations before and contributions and expenditures, is a citywide Democratic club, and they give frequently dozens of contributions per year to people running for office. It was a reasonable oversight that the Najmi campaign not believe that they were suddenly and briefly unregistered, and that's what happened. This was not a regularly scheduled election. This was the 2015 election, which was not quite a primary and not quite a special. It was a primary to fill an unexpected vacancy when Mark Weprin, who had been the council member, resigned to take a job in the Cuomo administration. But because of timing, the election that was called wasn't a classic special election. It was a primary on primary day followed by a general election. There were half a dozen or so candidates, and Mr. Najmi was one of them. It was not the only race that year, but it was one of very few races that year, and Mr. Najmi was doing housekeeping and cleaning accounts out and so forth, which comes up later in the exceeding the expenditure limit. However, for this, the contribution that they received, it was a reasonable conclusion to think that a club that had been registered and would again be registered, that had given, I don't know, 100 contributions in the prior 3 or 4 years, was a registered campaign committee, and to have taken that money. So I would ask you to reconsider the penalty on that. It's absolutely true that the donation was accepted, and that's the background.
Do you know for what period of time this club was unregistered?
I don't. I believe whenever I'm not going to guess because I would be guessing. But my guess really would be that it expired in the normal course of business. And I do know from my own knowledge that when I called the treasurer of the Jim Owls Club at some point to say, hey, you guys, you're not registered, which I did on the basis of having found out that this was claimed to be a not registered political committee. The treasurer said to me, I had no idea. Oh, wow, I'm going to go fix that right now. So that's my own conversation.
Do we have this information?
Yeah. So the way it works is political committees that intend to make donations in an election have to register for each election. So they did register in 2013 and made contributions. They did not register in the 2015 election and made contributions, and they have registered for the 2017 election and are making contributions. And the campaign was notified in the initial documentation request that they were an unregistered committee. And at that point, the Jim Owls Club had 10 days to register with the board as a political committee to avoid any penalty recommendation. And if not, the contribution should have been refunded at that stage.
May I?
And they did not.
They never registered for 2015, no.
May I ask whether there was any notification given beyond to the Jim Owls Club for registration, because clearly it didn't go to the person who was responsible for registering, whether there's any correspondence indicating that the Najmi campaign itself was at that time in that 10-day window informed of the problem?
In the initial documentation request that each campaign receives post-election is the first time that the campaign was notified that that committee was not registered for that election.
So it was a year later that they were notified? In
the initial documentation request, no, it probably wouldn't have been a year, right? For the 2015 one. No, a few months.
So not within that 10-day period where it was curable?
No, it's curable at the point of notification. So from the point of notification in the initial documentation request, the club had 10 days. The campaign, it was incumbent on the campaign to notify the club. They weren't a registered committee, and they had 10 days at that point to register retroactively for that election.
But that 10 days... was the Najmi campaign notified within that 10 days?
The 10 days begins once the campaign is notified.
Right, and that campaign notification was months later.
Yes.
Yeah. No, but your campaign gets the notification. They see that it's an unregistered committee.
No.
The notification went to the club.
The notification went to the campaign.
Goes to the campaign.
Yes, and it's incumbent on the campaign to notify the club that they weren't registered for that election.
The campaign is told, you've gotten a contribution from an unregistered committee. The campaign, has 10 days to notify the committee that made the contribution. If they register within the 10 days, there's no penalty.
So what I gather from that is whoever you notified ostensibly by mail from the Jim Owls Club that there was a problem.
We don't notify the club.
Not your campaign.
Only the campaign is notified.
Correct. It's up to the campaign to then arrange and contact.
So when I contacted the Jim Owls Club and they didn't do it within that period, it then becomes, in your reading of this, our fault.
Well, it becomes your obligation to return the contribution.
All right. Well, my explanation is what it is.
Were they notified within the 10 days? I mean,
not that I know of.
Okay. I just want to be clear.
I was not notified, and not that I know of, but
so
I don't know that the
they
campaign wasn't
notified
sent
them
somebody.
within
No,
the 10
I don't
days.
know that.
Okay.
The second item that I want to address, and excuse me, I have my PDF of everything on the phone here too, and it keeps timing out to shut down, are the impermissible post-election expenditures. And while the penalty on this is very small, I would point out to you that all expenditures that were made were legitimate political expenditures made for expenses incurred during the campaign that were just paid out after the campaign. Regarding
what were those expenditures?
Well,
because
Mohammed
our
Khan,
record is incomplete.
Well, on your exhibit here, you have.
These are on Exhibit 1.
I'm looking here at the Exhibit 1 exhibits. These are small and ongoing expenses for contact email, contracts, and some sort of administrative fee of 50 cents a piece from a company that handled transactional fees. The rest of them are all the remaining payments on a contract that are between $15 and $35 each, and they were all for campaign-related email work that was done. The total of them is only $302.
But did you provide evidence to the CFB that those were campaign-related?
I believe we did. In the volume that I submitted, I believe that there were...
Sorry, it's the issue is not whether they're campaign-related. It's that they were ongoing expenses incurred by the campaign 2 months post the election, and they followed for, looks like almost 9 months. So those campaigns are expected to wind down everything in the 2 months after the election, and anything that's not winded down, like these email servers and the Little and Company, are then counted as impermissible post-election expenditures.
And the problem with that, I think, is sort of it's systemic here, because what happens is that the companies with whom you contract during the course of the campaign require a certain contract period in order to give you a certain rate or in order to give you service at all. And they'll give you service through the general, they'll give you service maybe for a year. You have to sign a contract for that, and then you're paying them $30, but...
was the contract submitted to the board?
I'm sure it was.
I don't think we're...
If there was an actual contract as opposed to a click here on an email, it would have been submitted. If not, it might not have been.
I don't recall having evidence of a contract that stipulated that a time... I don't recall having evidence of a contract submitted by the campaign. I could take a further look that stipulated that it ran for a specific period of time that would have exceeded the election time.
Yeah, well, let me ask this question, because this is maybe a systemic issue. If one has to sign such a contract, and a contract goes for 4 months instead of 2 months beyond the election, what is a campaign to do? Should they just pay up in advance within the 2 month period and close it out? Would that be the proper way to handle that?
I haven't seen any of these companies in the campaigns I've dealt with where, I mean, campaigns routinely are able to wind these down within those 2 months. So I don't know if it's a systemic problem that we've encountered. Do you see it where?
Maybe for leases or something.
Yes, I like leases and things like that, but not for like a email server or, you know.
I mean, I think we've seen, a number of other campaigns that just, it's a small purchase you don't notice, and I think it's, it's more it's an inadvertent, but it's still beyond the period, and we do, tell candidates about the post-election spending and to tell them to be wary of it. But again, not as part of a global contract that the contract is for a year, but more of a you have a month-to-month service and it's a small amount, and so it's just inadvertently not noticed.
Okay, well, why don't you go on?
And the last one is actually the largest one, of course. It's the exceeding the expenditure limit. And here, I'd like you to reconsider the amount of the fine, because, of course, the fine doesn't come from campaign funds anymore. It comes from the pocket of the candidate and the pocket of the treasurer, possibly. Mr. Najmi had previously run for state office, and he had money left over in his state account. And while perhaps he should have known that he should have left it there in that state campaign account, what he intended to do was to get rid of it so that he didn't have a state campaign account anymore, so there wouldn't be any confusion. Other than these expenses, you can tell, because these are the only ones listed and they're all similar. He tried to stick very closely and remain under the spending cap, and he was very diligent and very careful about that. But because he didn't realize that getting rid of state funds, which he thought of as being clearing the decks, was going to be an issue, he managed to exceed the expenditure cap. And yes, that I understand that there is a rule under which the Campaign Finance Board can look outside itself in order to see if there's other money coming in. And I also understand the reason for the rule, although I think that the application here has a lot to be desired in general as a policy perspective. what you have here is someone who did give some undeniably political contributions out of that account, because it was in fact political money. For instance, to the New King's Democrats, which I should, point out would have nothing to do with the Queen's Council race, to the Jim Owls Democratic Club. On the flip side of the money that's received, there also are people who collect contributions there as well. The New Leaders Council is a policy group. I'm willing to concede that the United Federation of Teachers and the NAACP are groups that are arguably political, and not to argue about that for them. But what Mr. Najmi did was he decided to get rid of his money in the state campaign by giving it basically to charity. And so he gave it to the Masjid and the Muslim Center and the Calvary Baptist Church and the Greater Bethel Baptist Church and a Hindu temple and a number of churches, all religious institutions. And what he was trying to do here was get rid of the money in his state account in as ethical and clean a manner as he could think of. And what he thought of was spreading it around religious institutions so that it wouldn't be given for politics. And now his generosity and his good impulses and so forth are causing him to look at a penalty that you have here of 150% of the amount that you've calculated for exceeding the expenditure limit, which brings him up to almost $12,000 out of the pocket of a sole practitioner whose practice is an immigration law and indigent criminal defense practice to a great extent, and is a major imposition on his life. That's an enormous, enormous amount of money for him. And because it's a penalty for attempting to do good, I would ask you to please reconsider the amount of this penalty.
How do you explain the timing of the contributions? I mean, he's running for a race in the New York City Council, and how do you explain the timing of these contributions while his campaign was ongoing?
Because that's the first time he took a look at the state campaign funds and said, well, I can't use this anymore. Let me get rid of it.
Why didn't he just wait until after?
He should have. And he now knows he should have. But he didn't know he should have then. He didn't at that time have advice to tell him that, or know even to get the advice to tell him that.
And what was the reason why he was in such a hurry to deplete his state account?
In my understanding is that he wanted to deplete his state account then, so it wouldn't become confused with his district race for council. And yes, I mean, there are lots of things he would have done differently or better or correctly had he done it with the correct advice. And I am not saying he didn't do these things. He did make these contributions. He did make them at a time when he probably should have known to get better advice, although not everybody always knows that there's something to get advice about. What I'm asking is that you consider the severity of the penalty against an individual for doing what he at the time believed to be not political but charitable works.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Am I correct that even apart from the monies from the state committee, he was about $1,300 over the...
That's correct. Yes, there was other things that added to the expenditure limit calculation.
The the amount exceeded is 7869.24, and of that 6531 is the state committee expenditures. So there's 1,300 overage, irrespective of these.
Yes, there is, and I'm not going to dispute that at all.
Okay, I just want to.
No, I'm not disputing that at all. That's what, in my opinion, is sort of within the margin of error when you're running a campaign and you take your chances that you're going to be $1,000 one way or $1,000 the other way. But this is different.
And he didn't consider transferring the funds from his state committee so that they could be attributed to make sure that there were not any contributions over the limit or any contributions from prohibited sources in the money that he was using for his city council. He was using during the period of his city council campaign to clear out that state committee.
I don't believe I think that what he thought of that struck him to begin with, and I've had a number of conversations with him about it, was, wow, I'll just give this to charity. I'll just give this to a bunch of churches and mosques, and that'll be fine. And that was after we got this, that we had this conversation, or after it happened at the very least. So, no, he didn't think about doing that. He probably would have been well advised to do that, but he wasn't at that time well advised.
Did the candidate speak at any of these congregations, churches, mosques, temples?
No. Not that I know of. They're not even all in his district. The only place that would have been, and I again concede that this is a political contribution, would have been the Muslim Democratic Club of New York, which is it's about slightly above the middle of the list there. And that's clearly a political organization as well. He formed it, he established it, he was a past president of it, and I'm quite sure he would have spoken there. So I don't contest that one at all as being problematic. But the others, I do ask for your consideration.
Anything further?
No, I would just say that the penalty for exceeding the expenditure limit is set at that rate is because the benefit has been received, the election is over, the other candidates in that election didn't have the opportunity to make similar contributions to organizations and not be included in their expenditure limit. So that's why, and it goes up by, the recommended penalties amount go by the amount that the expenditure limit was exceeded by. So if it's only under 5%, then it's a 1-to-1. If it goes to 1.5% or 5 to 10% over the expenditure limit, then it goes to 1.5 over what's in there already.
So how do you explain the contributions to the New Leaders Council and the New Kings Democratic Club?
When I started speaking, I said that I was willing to consider those as being political contributions and appropriately subject to a penalty. They were, I would say, misguided. I would point out that New Kings Democrats, though, is not in the district. It's not even in the county. So if you take that into account, it to my mind, in any case, supports the idea that he was just giving money away broadly rather than targeting it towards his race.
Do you know which of these other religious institutions are not in his district?
No. But I do know that places like, Calvary Baptist Church, I believe, is in Manhattan. And I don't know where exactly the others are.
Okay.
But I do know that that this was intended to be a good and charitable deed, and I'd ask that you take that into consideration.
I just wanted to mention that in the handbook that the campaigns are given and in their candidate services trainings, there's a page on what can I spend campaign funds on, and they'll be considered campaign-related expenditures. And at the bottom are contributions to charitable organizations designated as 501c3 organizations, contributions to candidate, political, or constituted party committees. So proximity to the candidate or to the district is not in the list, or is not an exemption to that list. And all of these organizations that aren't political committees, I believe, are all 501c3 nonprofit corporations.
Do you know whether he had in the past given personal money to any of these religious or charitable organizations?
Yes, he did, but they would not have been necessarily in similar amounts.
I understand, but which of these organizations were his own personal
I'm
charities?
acting off of I'm now answering this off of my own recollection of a conversation.
Understood.
But I believe that there were prior contributions to a couple of the Muslim centers or Islamic centers, and to probably, I think, the temple, the Sri Shanawara Temple, and I believe also to the Queen's Baptist Church, although not in any amount near that.
And I would just add...
The rest I just either don't remember and don't know, and I'm not able to tell you that my recollection is absolutely perfect on that.
In the response to the DAR, which is the substantive response we received from the campaign, they did point out history of contributions, but the history was from the state committee. So it had been past contributions from the state committee, which isn't relevant to the only relevancy to personal contributions is when a candidate is making personal or making contributions from their campaign committee to, say, personal candidate contributions. If they have a personal history of giving to that organization, then that would be relevant to whether or not it was considered campaign related.
Well, the contributions that you referred to from the state committee, the prior ones, were those before the campaign began?
Yes, before the, yes, and we didn't include any of those in the finding.
Thank you.
And again, my request of this board is not that they decide that these were not outside the expenditure cap, but that in mitigation of the penalty itself, considering the totality of the circumstances.
Good. I think we've got the point.
Thank you.
Anything further?
No, thank you.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
The board will now go into deliberations. So back on the record in open meeting, the board has deliberated on the penalties and has reached the following decisions, which we'll vote on as a group in just a moment.
Could we not pull one out from that group, please? Can we pull one out from that group? 32BJ, if I'm going to...
Oh, right. We need to do it separately. Correct. Thank you. All right. So we'll take them one at a time. So the first one is candidate Ali Najmi. And the board is proposing the following findings and recommended penalties. Accepting a contribution from an unregistered political committee, $1,050. Making impermissible post-election expenditures, $50. Exceeding the expenditure limit, $7,619 for total penalties of $8,719. I'll move the approval of that of those findings and penalties. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Abstentions? That motion carries. The next is Empire State 32BJ SEIU PAC. The violation is late reporting of communications and expenditures, and the recommended penalty is $375. I'll move the approval of that finding and penalty. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions?
Abstain. Well, I see the value in not renoticing. I would have, as a first instance, imposed a higher penalty.
Thank you. That motion carries. Finally, NY class, animal protection. The following are the proposed alleged violations and recommended penalties. Failure to file August 30th, $8,789. Failure to file September 1st, $10,000. Failure to file September 4th, $1,250. Failure to file September 6th, $8,500. Failure to file September 7th, $10,000. Failure to file September 11th, $27, for total penalties of $38,566. I'll move the approval of those findings and penalties. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? That motion carries. That concludes our business today. I'll move to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Clearly unanimous. Our meeting is adjourned.